Welcome back. Senate Republicans are now warning that President-elect Donald Trump's nominee for Attorney General, former Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz, will struggle to win the support needed to be confirmed. Multiple sources telling Fox that Gaetz has been making calls to senators since Trump's appointment. But a bipartisan group of senators are demanding the House Ethics Committee release the findings from its investigation focused on whether Gaetz engaged in alleged sexual misconduct. The committee ended its probe after Gaetz resigned from Congress late Wednesday. Joining me now is former acting U.S. Attorney General Matt Whitaker. Great to see you, Matt. Thanks very much for being here this morning. What is your reaction to all of this around Matt Gaetz?
Well, good morning, and it's good to be with you, Maria. You know, obviously the Senate has an important advise and consent responsibility under the Constitution, but at the same time, President Trump won a comprehensive nationwide popular vote mandate in order to accomplish his agenda. And he should be entitled to get who he wants, because President Trump needs to be successful. The American people have watched the Department of Justice weaponized against Catholics, against parents at school board meetings, against Donald Trump. And so that needs to end. Merrick Garland, the current Attorney General, needs to get out of there. And the massive work of fixing the Department of Justice needs to begin in earnest as soon as the president is sworn in on January 20th.
You know, I want to get your take on some of the behavior against President Trump these last 10 years, Matt Whitaker, because, you know, we all know about Crossfire Hurricane and what happened with the FBI and the DOJ and how they worked against President Trump. Do you believe there was criminality there? And do you believe there should be accountability for the people who wronged Donald Trump around Crossfire Hurricane?
You know what, Maria, there absolutely has to be accountability. And what we saw, whether it's Crossfire Hurricane, whether it was the raid at Mar-a-Lago, where they took way too strong a stance and the Department of Justice overruled the FBI in order to execute that search warrant. We can point to, and we've talked many times on this show, as you know, about all of the things that the Department of Justice and the FBI has done directed at Donald Trump that has always not turned out to really amount to anything. And so, you know, you add that up, and you're right. Not only do we need accountability, but those things, again, within the statute of limitations, those people need to be brought to law and order, and the rule of law must be sustained. And it's just been a tremendous abuse of power under Merrick Garland and the Department of Justice, and it goes all the way back to, you know, the Obama administration as well.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to understand about the upcoming AG position, because the Attorney General will be faced with the possibility of going back to hold people accountable. And I'm wondering if that should be done with the next AG.
Well, Maria, there's going to have to be two things that are going on. One is there has to be you know, this reform, and I think there's a stronger word than reform, but for today, let's call it reform, where you end the weaponization at the Department of Justice, but you also need to restore the Department of Justice to the basic blocking and tackling of law and order, of making sure that violent crime is reduced, to make sure that our national security is always a top priority, and all of the things that the Department of Justice should be doing instead of playing politics like it has really for the last decade.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm saying is, I mean, at one point someone said to me, people go back in the water when they know the shark is dead, right? So is that the way to get trust back into these institutions? To make the point, to make people understand this will no longer be tolerated. And yes, there will be accountability.
Yeah, well, if you look at all of the current pending nominations from Donald Trump at the Department of Justice, if I'm a career person that wants to put my thumb on the scale and has been part of the weaponization, I would be very concerned, because it's not only just Matt Gaetz, it's Todd Blanche, it's all of the appointments that you're seeing the president roll out. You know, the deep state should be dramatically on the run, and those folks that have caused this weaponization know that it's going to be rooted out once and for all.
Now, Matt, there's a good chance that there's going to be serious debate around Matt Gaetz come confirmation season. If he does not get confirmed, are you willing to step up and take the job?
I think that's wild speculation, Maria. You know, I want the president to be successful. First and foremost, if he believes there's a role for me, then certainly that is something that we will talk about when the time's appropriate. But Matt Gaetz is his nominee, and if you watched Matt Gaetz in the Judiciary Committee over the last several years, and in fact I appeared in front of that committee when I was acting Attorney General, he has been a stalwart to reforming the Department of Justice, to holding people like Merrick Garland, Chris Wray accountable to the people of the United States, and I would expect he would do the same.
I understand. Understood, and that was very elegant of you. Look, the FBI and the DOJ are not going to go down without a fight. They are going down swinging. Look what just happened this week, Matt. The FBI seizing the phone and the electronic devices of the founder and CEO of Polymarket, Shane Copeland, after raiding his home earlier this week. A source told me 20-plus FBI agents showed up outside his door. They had guns blazing. They go in, they raid the place, they take his girlfriend's computer, they take his computer, his phone. No charges. No charges. Just this raid. The Justice Department is reportedly investigating the crypto predictions betting platform for allegedly accepting trades from U.S.-based users. Under a 2022 agreement with the Commodities Futures Trading Commission, Polymarket is supposed to prevent U.S.-based traders from making transactions on the platform. But a Polymarket spokesperson claims that the raid is political retribution by the outgoing administration for providing a market that correctly called the presidential election. So, A.G. Whitaker, I ask you, why would this FBI raid happen? Why did they raid his home, take his phone, and then not charge him? What is your assessment of what just took place?
Yeah, my assessment is that the Department of Justice and the FBI have lost the benefit of the doubt when it comes to these types of things. You're right. Polymarkets was predicting on a minute-by-minute, moment-by-moment basis the outcome of the election. The day of the election, that morning, they predicted that Donald Trump had the majority. You know what should be investigated? Things like these fake polls, like what happened with Ann Seltzer in the Des Moines Register's famous Iowa poll, where they suggested the eve of the election, 3 days before, that somehow Kamala Harris was going to win by 3 points when Donald Trump ended up winning Iowa by about 18. You know, that's election interference. That is probably an illegal campaign contribution, as much attention as that issue received at the time. And so, you know, the Department of Justice, again, they need to quit playing politics and go after the priorities of the American people, Maria. And that priority for me is law and order, the rule of law, making sure that violent crime is eliminated in our major cities, and protecting our national security. And that is the basic blocking and tackling that the Department of Justice needs to get back to. And every time they dip their foot into something that is a political hot potato, that's when they end up receiving the appropriate criticism, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think that is so well said. And by the way, you know, a minute ago you said, "Oh, wild speculation to talk about me as a potential person for the AG." You know, a lot of people want you there. You know that.
Well, Maria, again, I just want President Trump to be successful. I was with him last night. He is in a great mood. He's picking some fantastic people for his cabinet, many of which that I've worked with in the past and have known. I look at my friend Lee Zeldin and Doug Collins, just warriors that are going to do great things in support of the President Trump and his agenda to make America great again.
And the lead of that agenda is the wide open border. So now we understand that thousands of desk-bound ICE officers are reportedly expected to be back out in the field as Trump and his border czar, Tom Homan, are vowing to flood sanctuary cities with agents to carry out this mass deportation. Fox News Digital has also confirmed that the incoming administration is preparing to dramatically increase its capacity to detain illegal migrants as part of that deportation operation. Blue cities like New York City are already announcing the closures of migrant shelters, AJ. Your reaction to that, what do you think this is going to look like?
Well, based on everything I know about this plan, with Tom Homan leading border security and all of the pieces and components to that, it is going to be a smart plan. It is going to make sure that, for example, those that have already received an order of deportation are out of this country. That's over 1 million people. To make sure that all the criminals that came into our country under this ridiculous policy that the Biden administration had in place, that they are immediately removed. But you're right, these ICE agents should expect to do their job and should expect to go out in our cities and get these folks out of our country. And that's going to take, that's an operation. And we need to make sure we do it the right way and we do it smartly. But at the same time, we're going to have to move and plan to move millions of people out of this country that has no reason and no basis to be here in the first place. And make sure that at the same time, we continue to be the most generous country in the world that admits over 1 million legal immigrants to permanent status every single year.
Yeah, great analysis. Matt Whitaker, AG Matt Whitaker, great to see you. We so appreciate your time. Great conversation.